Welcome to this month's STEM Ecosystems webinar. For those of you new to this initiative, the STEM Ecosystem, supported by TIES, powered by TIES, which you can find at stemecosystems.org, harness the power of business and industry, funders and foundations, K-12 schools, higher education, and more to find solutions to common problems and to build thriving communities. Mid-February brings the opportunity to celebrate and focus on the impact of engineering at the national level. And today we're joined by Libby Simpson with Siemens and Thea Sahr with DiscoverE Engineering to help us understand the significance of National Engineers Week 2023, coming up February 19th through February 25th. Beyond understanding the importance of National Engineers Week, or EWeek, this dynamic duo is focused on providing each of you with an EWeek Easy Button. I know I always wanted one of those when I was in the school district, an easy way to engage students and volunteers in your community during this upcoming week, highlighting engineering. So let us know, while we're getting started here, what are some cool things that your ecosystem has done in the past to celebrate EWeek? If you don't mind, let us know in the chat, and we'd love to keep track of those. We might ask you a little more of those. And while we get started here, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, our first presenter. Elizabeth Libby Simpson is the Director of STEM Programs at Siemens and works to empower STEM educators and increase access to educational resources globally. Libby has more than 18 years of experience in education and has shared her passion for hands-on, minds-on teaching and learning in all phases of her career as an engineer, an educator, and a school and district CTE administrator. Her role with Siemens allows her to create innovative educational pathways that strengthen STEM teaching practices, build 21st century skills for students, and prepare a STEM workforce for the future. Libby has a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical and Electronics Engineering, a Master's degree in Business Administration, and a doctorate in Education Leadership with a specialty in inequitable access to STEM education from National Louis University. So Libby, I know even though you're an electrical engineer, I understand at some point you tried to become an IT technician at a school, but it didn't quite turn out the way you were expecting. What happened there?
Absolutely. The pathway to get where I am today is not a straightforward path. Definitely, when I looked at getting into education, it was supposed to be a temporary stop. In fact, I thought I was applying for a school IT position because the position was called technology education. I didn't know what that was. And lo and behold, this is this fantastic hands-on class that was under career and technical education, right at the time when kind of STEM was coming into the frame of things. And so I just found myself in this class that I was able to teach students all this fun stuff. It was the best, like most fun thing that we had going on in the school. So I took full advantage of that. And actually one of the first projects that I did with my students coming out of engineering, not having a formalized curriculum or lesson plans, I was given a cookbook of just random activities. And I was like, well, I know a relevant activity. I could teach these kids how to solder. And so we got the equipment. I taught them how to solder, told them, here's the types of jobs that you could go out and get right in your community, maybe when you're 16, because I was teaching middle schoolers. And I gave them a little soldering certificate. And so that, right there, like the light bulb went off for me. And I was like, this is the best. I teach kids actual practical skills. And that was kind of the moment I fell in love, and I never looked back to engineering. I accept teaching engineering, love teaching engineering, but I didn't need to go back. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think you found your calling, Libby, and I'm very happy for all of us that you did. And it always scares me when people talk about, oh, I got this book of activities, because what we never want to do is what we in STEM ecosystems refer to as random acts of STEM. And that's part of what I really love about the work at not only Siemens, but also DiscoverE Education. And Thea, I apologize that I called it DiscoverE Education when we first introduced you to DiscoverE Education. Thea serves as the Deputy Executive Director of DiscoverE.org and has a bachelor's degree in government from Clark University, as well as a master's degree in education from Boston University. Thea says her work philosophy is simple: dream big, get things done, and work with fun people. That's a really, really great philosophy. I'm going to put my stolen philosophy in the chat while you're talking. Starting out, Thea took jobs that looked interesting and over time noticed a pattern. So Thea, I'm hoping that you can talk to us a little bit about your experiences, but in particular, EWeek comes and goes every year. It's a national event. What do you hope is different this year due to this webinar? And what's this easy button for EWeek.
Sure. Thanks. So Engineers Week does come and go every year. And some people say, why do we need an annual event? Why do we need to keep doing this? Because every year there's new fifth graders. Every year there's, new sixth graders. Every year we need to remind kids that engineering is a viable option for them. And I had a colleague at the American Society of Civil Engineers who said, a lot of people think that S plus M, science plus math, equals engineering. But I like to think that engineering is the front door to science and math. Xanne said a great thing the other day. She's the fun part, right? It's where we get to do the fun. It's where you get to do the hands-on. You build that catapult, and then all of a sudden kids are like, oh, angles are important? What's an angle, right? So they can start to explore the science and really start to see the applications. And at Discover Engineering, that's what the E is for, we have made an audacious plan as part of our strategic thinking. And we reach about 5.5 million students every year during Engineers Week and Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day through our partners, and a lot of ecosystems out there doing EWeek, so thank you. But we want to get to 10 million. And we specifically want to get to girls, and we want to get to disadvantaged students, underrepresented minorities, those kids that may not know that engineering is a viable option for them. And I think about it, and part of my passion is, it's not just teaching kids about the engineering design process and how cool that is. It's a social justice issue for a lot of these kids. It's how my parents and grandparents moved up into the middle class. It's an economic ladder for a lot of people. So there's a lot to unpack in that statement. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So Thea, I'd like real quickly Lauren's got a poll that she's going to put up there, and we're going to ask all of you to answer kind of what's most important to you. While everyone is answering that question, Thea, I know that when we talked yesterday, you mentioned a little bit about a PBS television outreach campaign called Design Squad. That whole concept got me really excited. And I'm curious if you could talk, while people are answering, about how you went from a degree in government to co-creating Design Squad and leading Discover Education.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to my middle school guidance counselor. I signed up for drafting because I wanted to be an architect in 9th grade. And she said I didn't have the grades. I was only getting B pluses in math, and I was going to be the only girl. So she moved me into world history. And then I was like, okay. And I was 12. What did I know? 13. So I became a government major in college, and I worked for a congressman for a couple of years. And then I was like, ugh. And I ended up with a temp job at the Museum of Science in Boston. And I rediscovered my love for the built environment and for doing hands-on activities. And from there, like all great jobs, met wonderful people. One of them went to WGBH, the public television station. She called me up, offered me a job. And then I started to notice I was doing science. I was working for a show called Zoom. I was working for a show called Nova. I was working for a couple other shows doing outreach. And all the fun stuff was around engineering. And whenever we put it on TV, the engineering community was like, hey, can we have more of this? People wanted more of that. And so I whispered to another young colleague of mine, I said, we should do a show on engineering. I bet I can get the money. I bet we can do it. And so it took us 5 years, and we created Design Squad. And little known fact, Claire might know this. I saw Claire out there. She was around. She was one of our first advisors. It was based on Project Runway. We were like, hey, they're actually designing stuff. This is a competition show. How can we make it interesting? And Libby, the girls on the show were much better welders than the boys. They rocked the welding. It was one of the first skills.
Somehow I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it was one of the first skills we taught them, but it was just one of those. There was a big hole, and the engineering community came through with volunteers and money and support. And that's one message I continue to share to this day. The best partners you can have are engineering firms or engineering associations, because they show up with volunteers and sometimes with a little bit of cash and materials.
I love it. And I got so excited when you said you worked a little bit on Nova. I loved Loved Nova back in the day. Libby, before we get
Well,
started with Thea talking about Discover Engineering, I want to share the results of this poll real quick. And I'm hoping you could, with your experience as an engineer and working in education, just comment a little bit on what we're seeing here, that, the priorities of our audience here.
yeah, absolutely. And actually, I want to go back because I didn't realize that where the design squad came from. But as soon as I did find that out, I was definitely a Thea fangirl, because I was an educator at the time when that came out, and it was a core kind of project that we did, and an activity that we went to. The kids absolutely loved it. So
I'm quickly becoming
carrying
a
that
fangirl
forward.
also.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're carrying that forward. That's kind of the spirit that we create things with, is that, having something that's useful, having something that opens the door for engineering to any student that approaches it, that we can take those barriers down to making engineering more accessible, showing students that they can bring their whole selves to solving these big problems that we have, and that we need this diversity of thought to solve these big problems, as definitely in small problems in people's own communities. And so, from being inspired by things like Design Squad and a number of other things that are out there, I think that's what we need to bring forward with engineering education today, is just bringing all the voices to the table, and showing the students that there's opportunity for them there.
All right. So what I'm hoping we can do now we've got about 45 minutes left. I want to make sure that we can learn a lot and also have some time for questions. So Thea, can you talk a little bit about Discover Education, or engineering, the resources that are available there? And those of you in the audience, make sure you're listening. I mentioned before, but I'll mention one last time. Down at the bottom, you have that Q&A button. As Thea's talking, as Libby's talking in a little bit, go ahead and put any questions that you have there. Thea?
All right. So DiscoverE, and the E is for engineering, and we're not Discovery Channel, so we're not the TV station, but it's discovere.org. What we are is we are a coalition, actually, of over 100 different engineering, education, government groups that are committed to the E in STEM. And so our mission is really to connect students to role models, to engineers, and we do that through educators in schools, in after schools, in museums, in libraries, wherever they are, home schools. And we like to say we connect, educate, and celebrate. We were started, actually, Engineers Week was started in 1952. None of us on this call probably were around back then, or going to an Engineers Week event in 1952, but it really was, at the beginning, an opportunity. If you've been around engineers, and I see Bob Johnson is on the call, there's always been this little chip on their shoulder. We're not, scientists get all the glory and engineers do all the work, right? But it's not. Everyone is doing the work. Everyone is contributing. But how can we raise the visibility of engineers? So that's why Engineers Week was born. But then in the 80s, started to recognize that not enough kids were going into engineering. And so how do we get more kids interested? So Engineers Week pivoted and became the first organization to call for volunteers, STEM professionals, to go into the classroom, to go into the after schools and work with kids and talk to them about engineering. What is it? What do we do? How do we do it? And most kids don't know any engineers. They don't know a lot of technicians. They don't know a lot of technologists. So having these opportunities for your students is really important, to put that face on engineering. So we do that through a variety of programs. Engineers Week, our oldest one, Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day, which is the Thursday, always in Engineers Week. We have our Future City competition, where middle school kids design and build a city that can exist 100 years in the future. And a lot of you I saw, we have Austin, Texas, we have Boston, we have 40 regions around the US, 60,000 students are participating. Check it out. And we also have our Chats with Changemakers, which is each month we interview. We have a high school student. She's a SWE Nexter, Society of Women Engineers high school student. And she interviews a different engineer. And at the end of the 30 minutes, We do a little short video of the engineer introducing a hands-on activity. So if you can't bring someone physically into your space, we still have the virtual option for you to introduce kids to engineers each week. This year, Engineers Week is February 19th to the 25th. Girl Day is the 23rd. And our theme is creating the future. And it's celebrating engineers and all they do to create the future. And it's also to talk about our role to encourage and engage the next generation of innovators. So I saw some folks wanted, career exploration. Great. We have so much on career exploration, but just your easy button is what are some things you can do for Engineers Week? Tell a friend it's Engineers Week. That's the first and easiest thing to do. Just tell somebody else. Whoop, check, you're done. Go social. Post a message or a story about what you're doing. There is so much activity around EWeek 2023 hashtag or Girl Day 2023. It's also a great way to see other people that are engaged in your local community. Thank an engineer is another thing you can do. Hands-on activities, just set up a little expo, an engineering expo during your day. And Libby's going to tell you all about Hour of Engineering, which is going to be a really easy way to plug into Engineers Week. Go on a field trip. Tons of museums have different Engineers Week events. Your local university, Claire just posted in the chat about Northeastern's Engineering Expo during Engineers Week. And engage your parents. We've just done some recent studies and surveying that parents think that engineering and technology and technicians is a great career choice. So don't just think about how do I talk to my students about engineering, but how do you talk to their parents? How do you help them become allies? How do you give them the resources they need? So I'm going to share my screen and just show you a few things. Make sure I'm on the right page on our website. All right, I'm buying into Jeremy's no slide philosophy. So
not no slide, just no slides that aren't necessary.
I took it as a no slide philosophy. So this is the DiscoverE.org website. And the first place I want you to go is just Engineers Week. And you can kind of see our groovy graphic that we have. But we also have, and everyone's going to get this, is an educator planning guide. And you can just learn some really quick and easy things you can do for Engineers Week. We also have STEM careers. I noticed that people really wanted to know about how do they teach kids about careers. Look at all these. We have aerospace, ag, biomedical, environmental. We just did mining the other day, but mechanical engineering. So you can come into any of these, get a quick overview. You can meet an engineer in that field. Here's David, he works at TE. Learn about the salary, how many jobs. We also found in our recent research that kids are really interested in knowing how much money they can make as an engineer. They're in elementary and middle school, they're already starting to think about that. And then what are the kind of jobs you can do with a 4-year degree versus a 2-year degree? And what are some hands-on activities that you can do to explore those degrees? Here's our little sign up for our newsletter. We also have over 178 different kinds of activities, and you can filter them by how much time you have, 45 minutes or less, the grades you are working with, the topics you want, or the engineering disciplines that you want to support. But when you get to those activities, you'll see here, we have student instructions, we have instructor guides, we have challenge videos, and then quickly materials. And this, our philosophy on materials is we want them to be cheap and easy to procure. So rulers, scissors, drinking straws, lifesavers. Okay, you have to go to the store for the lifesavers. Toilet paper, but really thinking about low cost materials so that this is available to everybody, and just what are the instructions. And our instructions follow the engineering design process of brainstorm, build, test, evaluate, redesign, the most important step, and sharing your results like a good engineer or STEM professional. If you want, we also have all these groovy downloadable resources, logos, graphics, all the graphics you see, Zoom backgrounds, certificates, bookmarks. And also we have this really cool library of free copyright-free images. You don't have any images of kids doing engineering or what engineering looks like. You can use all of these. And then of course it'd be remiss. We also have a store. That's the only thing we charge for. But if you need t-shirts, cups, sticker sheets, whatever you want to make your engineers week good. And then I'm gonna cut out soon, but the last thing I want to talk about is a lot of folks during Engineers Week work to invite an engineer, or technician, or technologist into their program. And the question we always get is, how do I do that, Thea? How do I get an engineer to come in and talk to our kids? So we have a whole section of our website, and I'll put this in the chat, but it's all about how do you find STEM professionals. First place is to ask your students because they might already know somebody, but reach out to your local organizations, your local universities, your local engineering societies, Society of Women Engineers, Society of Black Engineers, Society of Hispanic Engineers, electrical engineers, any kind of engineer you can think of, they have their own society, and most of them have K-12 outreach groups that are dying to go out and visit your students. And then there's also the virtual option of chats with changemakers. We also talk about planning, ideas for you to consider what it looks like, and then kind of the final arrangements. And then of course, all of the different activities you can do. And then also if, to Jeremy's point, not about just give them a dump and run, but how do you help your students build their STEM identity? How do you talk about engineering? What is the engineering design process? What's your role when you're leading a STEM activity? Believe it or not, it's not to do it. A lot of people get so excited they start doing it. And what does it mean to be a role model? And specifically, what does it mean to be a role model if you're not a STEM professional? How do you, as a non-STEM professional, talk about that? A lot of people feel like I can't authentically talk about it because I'm not one, but it's really about being open, being curious, about engaging with the engineering design process and saying, hey, I don't know the answer. How do we go forward and find out? So we really invite everybody to come and be part of the journey of helping kids build their STEM identities, regardless of what they do and where they go, because it's just a great way to think about the world and think about your space in it.
So those of you who are here with us today, make sure you log in right now. While we're talking right now, you can multitask and sign up for the mailing list and all those things at DiscoverE Education. I love that you mentioned inquiry-based instruction. It's a big belief pillar of the STEM ecosystems, Thea. So you're speaking our language. I want to mention one comment in the chat, which is our friend Claire Duggan says, we also suggest local public libraries showcase engineering books during the week. That's such a great avenue. And there's very few libraries, I think, out there that wouldn't be very, very responsive to that. So that's just a phone call. And then you're getting a whole additional audience. And in many cases, they'd be happy to put up signage that links people to your programs and events. Libraries are some of our absolute best partners. Before we move on to, you go ahead, Thea.
I was just going to say libraries around the country do Engineers Week events, but if you do want to do those signs, download those graphics. You can plop them in and then put your own logos on and just make them your own. So that's, you don't stare at the blank page.
Love it. It's back to that easy button, Thea. It's whatever we can do to make things easier. Before we move on to Libby, Anne asked a great question in the Q&A tool. Anne, I'm hoping you can ask your question for us.
Sure. So I ended up being a chemistry major, got an advanced degree in chemistry, but I was in all the high level math and science classes in high school, and not once in those 4 years did anyone even mention the word engineering. I didn't realize what it was until I got to college, tried it, but by that time I was more devoted to chemistry and I kind of didn't like the one class I took. And so my question is, that was a long time ago. back in the 80s. I'm old. But has this changed an awful lot? Okay, I'm seeing faces not. And what can we do about it? I'm running a nonprofit to help improve science education, particularly for kids who are not already interested in science. That's where my question comes from.
Yeah. So name it. That's, so many times people that we say one of the easiest things you can do during Engineers Week is talk about engineering, name it engineering. We default to STEM, we default to science. Your core classes, your chemistry, your biology. So many high schools and middle schools don't have engineering classes. In Massachusetts, we're a little luckier. Some of them do, but not all. So one of the easiest things you can do during Engineers Week is just start naming and identifying it as engineering and talk about it. And you can go to our website and we have, how you can talk about it, like what's effective, what do kids want to know, what are little bite-sized pieces, and bring those engineers to talk to your kids.
Absolutely. And I think you have to think about who's the sphere of influence and those influencers in students' lives these days. And it is everybody from parents, yes, but it's educators, it's guidance counselors, it's support staff within their schools, it's after school programs. So the more that we elevate and like Thea said, name it and talk about engineering specifically, then the more people who are informed that are circling our children are able to help guide them.
I think what it comes down to is this whole easy button concept. We're doing that easy button concept for you, but it's our role as ecosystem leaders and as leaders around the country to create that same easy button for schools. The more that we can give just a very simple prepackaged solution that they're welcome to, to modify and change if they've got that motivation, but they also can just drop it in morning announcements, have teachers mention it, put it in newsletters home to parents, all of those things, the better. All right, Libby, I think a lot of folks here already know you and the really incredible work of Siemens. Siemens has been a great partner of the ecosystems for just about as long as I've been around, I think, maybe longer. But I also know you've got this big focus on Engineering Week. And talk to us a little bit about what Siemens is doing and what we should be looking for and doing to support that work.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, and Siemens being a global company, we've been involved in ecosystems from the industry perspective, from the workforce perspective for a very long time. But it's kind of like, well, how can we get more involved? How can we kind of come out of this more traditional role that we're in and actually help be part of the solution out there? And that's where I come into play, and the work that we're doing on the academic side of things comes into play. And so the very first step that we're taking in that direction is with Hour of Engineering. And like we've been talking about so far, having that focus on engineering and making things very easy, plug and play for anybody who's going to facilitate or looking to do anything related to engineering, whether it's during Engineers Week or at any other point of the year in any sort of learning environment, whether it's just a very quick point in time where we're just doing a simple activity, or we want to infuse that more, a little bit more into a learning program of some sort. And actually, Jeremy, I don't know if we fully shared the poll, but the 3 top things there, I'm really excited, are hands-on activities, career exploration, and something fun and engaging, because that's exactly the kind of the core tenets of Hour of Engineering. And so I'll get my screen shared here. And the Hour of Engineering is really something that I'm super proud of because we were able to take and put all of the things that kind of grab the students' attention, but then make it easy for anybody to facilitate the learning about engineering. We put all of that in here. And so it's a free to use resource. It's available now at hourofengineering.com. And so what you're seeing right here is our landing page. And we've designed this to be a kind of choose your own journey. Most of the things that you're going to see on the site are all student facing. And so this is meant for the students if they land here themselves or if they're directed here, they can explore freely and see what engineering is about. But then there's a support resources for anybody who's going to facilitate the learning as well. And so we have a great teacher's guide. It's really an educator's guide for anybody who's going to facilitate learning. And we even have a scope and sequence that kind of can guide you into how to use the different sections of the site. We have 3 main sections of the website for students to explore. On the landing page here, you might notice you've got some glowy buttons here. And so there's 2 different types of things that students can interact with here. And one of them is an interactive 3D model. So this one happens to be of the satellite. They can explore, and we take them right into this kind of design environment, but not in a way that's intimidating. It's something that they can kind of click and explore around. And then the other thing that we have here, it brings engineering to life through other perspectives. So whether it's a math perspective or science perspective or nature, we're trying to make those connections between what those foundational pieces are in engineering, so that there is that connected learning that's happening for students, and they can see like how these things apply and what's the application of math and science and how that comes through engineering. So that's just on the landing page of our website as soon as you get here. But then we have a couple of other sections. And one section is the learning modules. And so these learning modules are the white boxes here. And I was really glad that career exploration was one of the things that popped up on the list. I know getting students exposed to different types of careers was always super important in my class as well. And doing that in a way that students can actually see, like, what problems am I solving? What kind of information am I using with this type of engineering, and breaking that down. And so our learning module about what is engineering does that. We have a really cool video here that explores the different types of engineering and what that looks like to kind of work in those environments and what sort of problems they get to solve. But we also have where we can drill down into the different subclasses of engineering. And when you go down into those different sections, you actually have a lot of information that's shared from a perspective of what happens in that type of engineering, but then also what the engineers in those classes are actually doing and what problems they're solving. A little bit of an interactive section there. And then we look from a historical perspective. Who are the important people who made advancements and innovations and inventions that led to kind of where we get to today with some of our technology? And then who's in the field of engineering today, and what are the types of things that they're working on? So students can really get a sense of the kind of the breadth of the different classes of engineering. And then also kind of what's happening today. What are the things that are trending in engineering today? Because it kind of gives them an indicator of what problems they might be able to dig into and to solve. So that is the learning module for what is engineering. And then the last section that we have on the site are design challenges. And so these are packaged, ready to go, so that anybody can kind of direct students towards these challenges. They're fun to do on your own. I know we made a lot of them, but I pop into them from time to time, testing them out, and it's every time it's fun to kind of go through them. And they have an online and an offline component. That hands-on piece is so critically important. It not only brings some of the fun, but brings that interactivity to what the students are doing. It allows them to use a lot of creativity. And so the online piece is great. It's easily accessible. It kind of helps them build the foundation, gives them a lot of information. We've done it in a way that's gamified as well. And I'll show you a little bit of that in just a second. But the hands-on piece, the offline piece, is just as important. So when we see these design challenges, it's really 2 parts that is important for the students to do. And if I can get in there real quick. So this, when you pop into a design challenge, we have an introductory video. And so it introduces students to that topic. And then when they go into the design challenge, so this is not the bridges one, this is a different one where students are exploring with the fidget spinner. Some of the challenges have this interactive 3D viewer where they're actually seeing things in this design environment, and they're able to actually interact with the models in here. And then as they kind of step through the online challenge, sometimes there's some questions that they're asked, and they choose the question. And if they get it correct, they get their star. So that's a little bit of gamification for the students to kind of stay motivated as they're going through and learning about these objects. And we've chosen the topics to be relevant, but we've also chosen the topics to be aligned to what students at the kind of middle school age level are learning about in science and in math. So one of the things that we know that is important is to make sure that we're tying the learning to things that maybe they're already learning about, so that we're bringing that relevance for engineering. But it also, within a school environment, it also makes it easier for a math or a science teacher to maybe be able to introduce this in their classes, to take one class period out, and if something is aligned to what they're doing, be able to introduce this and bring this into their class. And so we talked about earlier, like that sphere of influence, widening that sphere of influence. It doesn't have to be just that special STEM teacher or the engineering teacher. It really could be any teacher. And so that's what we wanted to make these activities something that are really easy, really accessible, free, and have all the supports for anybody who wants to deliver engineering to students.
Are there any activities in there, Libby, that allow students to design some sort of method for calming your dog down so he's not upset while you're presenting?
No, but I'll put it on our list because I think I definitely need it. And I'm sure other people need it too. I'm not sure how relevant that will be to students, but we can look at doing that.
And those of you, before Libby continues, those of you who haven't played around with Hour of Engineering, I got the opportunity to talk with a lot of young people who are engaging in Hour of Engineering, and man, they loved it. It's a really, really great, simple to use product that's got extension activities for real life building, but also virtual labs for folks who, either need the pre-work or who don't have access to materials. A lot of interesting exploration opportunities to learn about different career paths. And Libby, smack me if I'm wrong, but I think you're continuing to add content to that site, and it's going to just keep on growing and growing.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, there's so many different activities. There's so many different topics to explore. We're just really just scratching the surface with what we have now. And so we plan to grow everything from the learning modules to the design challenges and just continue to add content. So I did want to point out the educator's guide. So those resources are really, really helpful. Each of those design challenges has their own lesson plan that goes through what those connections are, but then also goes through how to facilitate the activity both online and offline, has some of those offline resources that are needed to facilitate that, including the materials. And Thea, spot on, those materials have to be low cost, easily accessible. That doesn't mean that the rigor isn't there, because there's a lot of design, there's a lot of engineering you can do with cardboard. The dumpsters were probably one of my best resources, and we built some pretty complex stuff with cardboard and duct tape. So there's a lot in there that can be done very easily. You don't have to buy specialized kits and to have the content be equally rigorous. And then the educator's guide for the overall site. How can you tie the different sections together? If you have 1 hour, what can you do? If you have 5 hours, we have a scope and sequence all the way up to 40 hours worth of content across the site now. And so use it, share it across your communities. Websites down there again, hourofengineering.com. You can share this with anybody. Anybody can facilitate this and share this with their students, with their family members. But like Jeremy said, we are always wanting to get more ideas. We want to continue to grow. We want to continue to have this be a great resource. And I'm not in the classroom every day now. And so we really need to hear from educators and people who are working with students all the time. And so we have a wonderful educator community that we're really trying to build out as our think tank, to share ideas, to say, hey, this would be a great idea, just like Jeremy did, because that's going to make sure that we're really providing the best resource for anybody who's trying to teach students about engineering.
Excellent. So, excuse me. I've got a question here from Jessica that I forgot to allow her to talk. Hi, Jessica. I'm hoping you can ask your question and we can talk about that a little bit. Jessica. All right. Well, if Jessica comes, she can continue, but I'll ask her question for her while we're waiting. So Jessica's saying, with the theme of an easy button, are there existing in either of your platforms pre-made newsletter content with these resources for us to share with our districts? How can we easily get this message out?
I bet Thea does, so we let her go.
We do. If you go to that downloadable resources page, and I'll share it again. Hold on, I gotta find it. Oops. I'll just go. We have all kinds of resources. Screen 2. Oops, here it is. Right here on this page, DiscoverE downloadable resources, which you can get to in our footer. But so we have sample text for Girl Day, sample text for Engineers Week. If any of you want to see if your local city wants to do a proclamation, we have proclamation language. If you want more copy, you can go up to the Engineers Week page and we have the theme. So we have information about the theme and just kind of what Engineers Week is, and everything we write so that you don't have to. And Jessica, if there's something specific you want, you can reach out to me. My email is really tricky. It's thea@discovere.org. And we can get you exactly what you need, because we really want this to be as plug and play, as easy for you as possible. So whoops. And if you want to join our community and get monthly emails with activities, after 30 seconds, this will pop up on your screen too. But if you go to this page right here, downloadable resources, it has all of our hashtags, all of the logos, and then all of a copy and even posts you can use on your social media.
And it is worth mentioning that while Thea's email is easy, I at least have tried to email her by typing thea@discoverE.org. So that's discover the letter E.org, and you can see it on her image up there. But make sure you're hitting the right DiscoverE. So before we close, there's a comment in the Q&A tool from Bob that I think is worth throwing out, Libby and Thea, and that's Bob is saying that one big issue that he's run into, especially since COVID, is in finding volunteers. It's always been tough. People are busy with family, people are busy with friends, and then COVID made it even tougher. So what strategies are the two of you using or seeing used that are effective in rounding up volunteers to work with these different schools and organizations of young people?
Yeah, no, that's been a tough one. That was a tough one even before COVID. So I think, having people who are representing the engineering field are important. And if you can get someone, even maybe if they're not from your community, through COVID, we've learned to embrace remote. And so one of the things we used to do is have people remote in and talk to a group of students. So that's always something. But I think we also need to lean into, facilitating activities and things. Those things don't need to be led by an engineer or someone in the STEM field. And I bet Thea, in your section there about how to facilitate that and how to represent for students, how anybody can learn to do that. I think it can really drive home that even adults that don't have an engineering background can get involved and do engineering. And that really shows the students that anybody can be an engineer. And so it kind of leans into that side of things. So that would be my recommendation, is if anybody who's willing to work with the students and share these resources and do engineering activities, I think that's the person that you grab onto.
And I would exclamation point, Xan finger snapping, Libby is right on with the advice she gave. And I'd say the other piece is Engineers Week is a national call. It's an international call every year during February. And so we start priming the pumps with those STEM professionals out there. So they know it's Engineers Week. They're a little bit more like, hey, yeah, no, I want to do something. Their company is like, yeah, we've got to get you out there doing something. So now is a great time to reach out to those different engineering societies, those different universities, those different engineering companies in your local area, because they're like looking around for Engineers Week events and ways to engage their audience. And then once you start that relationship with them, it's like any good relationship, right? So use EWeek as kind of like, hey, let's get together. And that might be, I'm too busy during Engineers Week. Well, guess what? Engineers Week, if we only did an hour of engineering or Engineers Week or a day, we would never solve this problem. STEM is a 365, 24/7 endeavor of just engaging kids. And it's just kind of reminding people during Engineers Week that do hour of engineering in April, bring that person in May. And if you can't, check out Chats with Changemakers. We have on the 26th of this month, Tuesday, the 26th, is that Tuesday? We are going to have a special Chats with Changemakers with Bart, and Bart designs sports stadiums around the world. Don't you want to meet Bart? I do. I mean, what the heck? He has like this really great job. And then in February, you get to meet two engineers who work at a little organization called NASA on Girl Day. So on February 24th. So there's virtual opportunities that are ready-made for you. Libby's point about finding those Uber volunteers, because they'll call right into your program, and then getting the local people to come in too.
Xan has a great point and that she put in chat. There's students up and down the spectrum who are in competition groups, student leadership groups that, they're doing outreach. That's kind of one of their core things, is to do outreach. And even if they're not a STEM focused student leadership group, the students at the high school, at the college level, those are good ones to get in contact with as well.
I think a thing that's really important to remember with all of this work is to never let perfect get in the way of good enough. We know what perfect is. We want not only people live in our classrooms, but we want people who represent engineers of color, engineers from the LGBTQ plus community, female engineers, all of those things, because we know that our young people need to see everyone represented. But while we always want that to be the goal, and Zoom is not as good as real life, Zoom is better than nobody. So that's important thing number one. I want to mention what Claire mentions in the chat a little bit ago, that she's engaged with retired engineers, alumni, undergraduate students, and also one to add to that we've had success with in the ecosystem that I work most closely with, in reaching out to the companies that hire engineers. They know that they need a consistent pipeline of engineers who are really high quality in the region. And many of these larger companies, I'm thinking of, in this region, there's a company called Swagelock, and there's a Boeing facility, and all of these different things. A lot of those larger companies have built-in volunteer hour programs. And what we find that's really interesting is that when we talk to schools, they say, we want professionals to come in, but we don't know how to get them. And then when we talk to the professionals, we hear, we want to be in schools, but we don't know how to get there. It's just a disconnect. And that's one of the key roles of ecosystems, is to bring those two parties together and to solve this problem. You get to be a hero while doing very little, because everybody's already invested. So that's, I think, an important thing to do. All right, before we close, Thea, Libby, Engineer Week, Hour of Engineering, easy buttons, all of those things. What's a call to action? What should folks be thinking about doing right now, today, or this week, in order to prepare for next month? Libby?
Yeah, I would say pick one thing and figure out how you're going to execute that one thing, whether it's going to be, you know, we're going to do an activity in this particular school or with this group of kids, focus on that. If you're looking at getting more involved and bringing a whole effort to it, you know, just pick that one thing, round up your volunteers and go for it.
Yeah.
I love Libby's pick one thing. I think it's the right thing. And you know, you start easy and then get more aggressive. And you know, the beautiful thing about Engineers Week, it's around every year. Every year we could have this workshop every year. And it's building. We had this one guy, his wife was pregnant, and he decided that he wanted to make sure that engineering was part of his local elementary curriculum. So you know what he did when she was pregnant? He called up that year and just told the school it was Engineers Week. Then the next year he called up and said, I'm going to come into your school. And the next year he said, I'm going to bring a friend. And by the time his kid was in 3rd grade, he had the whole school during Engineers Week stuff. And he's like, I can't keep doing this. So he called his alma mater. And then they are bringing in 80 undergrads every year to the whole district, right? But it started with that one phone call. Hey, I'm a local engineer. My wife is pregnant and I want to get involved in the school.
Absolutely.
And grew.
Yeah,
So
engineers, oh, sorry. Engineers Week, it is the time to focus on it, right? You have a spotlight, but that spotlight might be that, hey, yes, this is when it's happening this year, but this isn't the right time for us. So let's do it next month. Let's do Engineers Day at a different point. So, you know, that can be the inspiration as well.
Definitely. It's all year. Every day.
Even though it messes our closing flow a little bit, I think it's really important to point out, because I forgot to mention it, Isaiah's comment in the chat. Isaiah mentions NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers, how what a great resource they've been in Lancaster, also here in Cleveland, and also all over the country. So if you're not already engaged with that organization, they're a really powerful organization that can answer a lot of these problems. So thank you, Libby and Thea, for sharing your decades of learning and expertise to help the SLACOP continue to inspire the next generation of engineers and other STEM professionals. Next month, we have 2 webinars you shouldn't miss. First up, February the 2nd at noon Eastern Time, the Pitch event is back. Here's a unique opportunity for the SLACOP leaders to hear and make pitches for authentic partnership with large grant writers from across the country. Too often, the expertise of SLACOP leaders and that of researchers have been siloed away in the grant-making process, and the pitch is designed to bring these 2 groups together early on for more impactful and successful grant writing. Come and see what all the buzz is about regarding the pitch. And finally, on February 24th at noon Eastern Time, we have Caliper, measuring the strength of relationships across ecosystems with Dr. William Fisher. You've been hearing about this tool for years. It's finally fully ready for broad release. It's really, really exciting. I was just part of using Caliper in Alabama, and the results that we got back are really, really actionable and useful for that ecosystem to continue to grow. And I think that you'll all see a lot of value in it as well. So make sure that you don't miss those 2 events either. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to those of us listening from the recording. Thank you, Thea, Libby, DiscoverE, and Siemens. And we will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.